Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of ALN Thursday at 3. My name is Mike Bordenaro. I'm the Executive Director of the ALN, and very happy today that we have both Mark Knight, a Principal Consultant at 1898 & Co., who is also an ALN Senior Fellow, joining us with Amelia Sakoy, who is a former Assistant Director with the U.S. Government Accountability Office and is a writer now for Woolpert in their asset management division. And what we're going to be talking about is the Institute of Asset Management North America conference, with both Amelia and Mark went to last week and actually presented together. And then we're going to talk about ISO 55013 asset management guidance on management of data assets. So first we're going to go through our usual introduction of thanking our patron members, Jacobs, Mantech, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, and thanking all of our organizational members who make these programs possible, and also the upcoming programs, which we're going to just touch on briefly here. Our 2024 Federal Asset Leadership Insights program is November 13th and 14th. And what we'll be doing is talking with Byron Dunlop, the Enterprise Asset Management at the Architect of the Capitol. But we'll also be having a panel from the Government Accountability Office that Amelia will be facilitating. Something we're working on to tie in with the National Institute of Building Sciences Digital Twins Conference, December 9 through 11 at the National Harbor near Washington, D.C. So we're hoping that on the 21st, we'll do a little preview of a presentation that the Asset Leadership Network has been brought into through our member organizations who are presenting there. So that's going to be the 21st. If everything works out right, we'll have a preview. And we're also keeping open our survey, and I'll put a link to the survey that we started with the Asset Management Council in Australia, and we'll also be reporting on that in the ALN Federal Asset Leadership Insights program. And Amelia, if you can join us. And Mark, welcome. There's a link to the survey if you haven't taken it yet. So many of you already have. I thank you for those of you who have taken it. Anyway, so Mark and Amelia, you were both at the Institute of Asset Management North America Conference. Can you give us a little briefing on what you saw and what you presented together also?
Sure, Mark, I can start if you like.
Okay.
The IAM, as you may know, is celebrating 30 years of its, existence. And this year was a really important year, many people may know, because the ISO 55000 series was updated, and the IAM updated its asset management anatomy, and the GFMAM also updated its asset management landscape. So it's a big year for asset management, and that's what was being emphasized. I can just give you a high-level summary of my impressions, but I thought it was a great conference. There were about 300 people there in Denver, and it's mostly state and local governments and utilities. It's not common, really, in the times that I've been there, for the U.S. federal government to present, but there was one U.S. federal government presenter, Byron, who you're going to be featuring in a couple weeks, from the Architect of the Capitol. As far as I could see, he was the only federal agency that was presenting on their compliance certification for the ISO 55001 standard. But there are a lot of common themes that we often talk about. One thing that I found interesting was several of the presentations focused on the placement of asset management within an organization, where the asset management function sits within an organization. And I thought that was really interesting because it does make a big difference on what the organizations are able to do in terms of, looking across the portfolio and collaboration across the organization, um, portfolio management. And most of those, the ones that I saw were the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, San Jose Water Company, Charlotte County, Florida. Those were a few of them. And another part of change management was a topic, and focusing on the individual role in change management. The importance of individuals and how they have an influence on change management, which is not a new concept, but it was very interesting to hear some examples about that. And the other big area was maintaining infrastructure. And Mark and I did present on deferred maintenance, but there were other presentations that talked about life cycle costs. Denver Airport presented, he was a keynote. He presented on the importance of operations and maintenance and how that's the majority of what you're doing during the life cycle management. That was a great presentation. And just the issue of not including, Lou Cripps spoke on the problem of not including life cycle costs, not planning for maintenance, which is a common problem, but that issue was highlighted throughout. And there was a really interesting presentation that I liked from Africa, looking at water and environmental management across the continent of Africa. So that was a different perspective. I've not heard that before. So a lot of presentations, interesting, those are sort of the main topics that I saw, from the ones I attended, but there are a lot of other presentations and just key themes. And I saw a lot of diversity in the attendees, which was really nice to see. So I don't know, Mark, if you want to add any thoughts.
Uh, what did you miss? Not a lot, I think. There was quite a few transportation agencies there as well as utilities. And like you said, the Denver Airport CEO, I found his
Philip Washington.
yeah, his keynote was really good. It kind of started off okay and just got better and better and better. It was just a gold mine of really good sound bites. Only a few of which I managed to capture. But it was interesting because he's passionate about how asset management is a part of what they're doing. And it comes back to that. What's the difference between management and leadership? And I know, we've talked about this before, Mike, and in fact that the IAM ALN white paper, you need leadership at all levels. But if you don't have top management support, you're ultimately fighting a bit of a futile battle. And Amelia mentioned change management and the impact of the individual psyche or psychology on what's in it for me and getting. I mean, that's what change management is all about, right? But one of the things that changed in the global forum landscape is actually the inclusion of change management as one of the subjects within the kind of umbrella of asset management. And just as asset management's dependent on top management support, this change management is the same thing. If you don't have that high level support and reinforcement of the message, people will start to ignore it if you're not careful. But other than that, no, it was a great conference, and I think we had a fun time presenting.
Well, will you tell us a little bit about what you and Amelia presented?
Oh, I'm gonna get called out on this. The title was the hidden and not so hidden impacts of deferred maintenance, and Amelia. I like to start with a catchy title and work from that, right? And we got together the day before the presentation, and Amelia says, we don't really call out the hidden impacts in the presentation. We only had one written question after the session, and it said something like, "You didn't mention the hidden impacts of deferred maintenance. Can you elaborate, please?" So So I think we did, and we talked about that, but it was really focused on work that Amelia and her colleagues had done when she was with GAO, looking at several federal agencies and how much deferred maintenance has increased. Well, actually, I'll probably let Amelia describe it, but the increase over time and what that means. And we, as part of the definition that the GAO is using and kind of where our discussion went, there's a thin line between what you count as deferred maintenance and what you don't. Which, I mean, there's a bit of a rabbit hole that we probably don't need to go down now.
Amelia, can you briefly give us an overview?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned a couple of GAO reports, but Mark also provided context, from his perspective. So it wasn't just GAO work, it was a combination of a couple of GAO reports, the one on deferred maintenance, and the GAO 1957, where we set up an asset management framework. And then we put the findings in sort of a different context than what GAO had done. So that made it interesting. Mark came up with some graphics, and I think we actually did mention some of the hidden impacts of deferred maintenance, but we didn't explain them that way. But for example, compliance with regulations, I think that could be a hidden impact.
For
So
sure.
we did have them. We had a list of risks on the slides. We didn't specifically call them out and say these are hidden impacts. So it might have been a little unclear to the audience, but yeah, what else? It was nice to see that other speakers said similar things, about the importance of operations and maintenance, and including all the life cycle costs for the asset and portfolio management, which is always a problem, especially, well, among federal agencies anyway.
Well,
What
the
else?
culture of asset management is getting entrenched. If people are saying some of the same foundational things, that's a good sign for the country in general. And so that's good to hear.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not the federal agencies, but it's the state and local and the utilities. Yeah,
Well,
but
we've got federal agencies that are really stepping up, and that's what we're going to be giving a highlight to on November 13th and
Right.
14th, and maybe the 21st also. So thank you for that transition, Amelia.
Okay.
We're helping highlight the improvements that are happening at the federal level. And one area where the culture of asset management is unified is the importance of data. So we're now going to shift over to a discussion on the creation of the ISO 55013 data as an asset document. Mark, do you mind if I share a screen that shows some of the outline of that?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll put up the website later, but this is, if I can get to it properly, the website from the ISO that shows the outline. Is that showing an outline?
Yep.
Okay, so it follows the typical ISO documentation, scope, normative references, and terms and definitions coming first. And then it very quickly gets into managing asset data. Documented information, life cycle, delivery of value from asset data, identifying data assets, managing data assets, governance. So I just wanted to show that as a kind of general reference of what the document is talking about. Is there anything else that you think would be good to show, Mark?
To show, probably not. I mean, that
Okay.
was you kind of covered what I was going to cover anyway with that, because I thought the contents, well, I looked up. So we in your invite, you said Mr. Knight will discuss the rationale and structure of the standard and discuss ways it could be practically applied. So I mean, the structure is a big piece of that, which you have covered. And again, it's like any kind of ISO management standard. It's same sections up front, and once you get to section 4, you start getting into details. I will just preface what I'm saying with a couple of things. One is my involvement with 55,013 was actually fairly late. I've been staying out of the TC 251 stuff for a while, and decided to jump back in. I jumped back in around about the time that the US TAG mirror committee chair for working group 9, which is the working group working on 55,013, had to step back for personal reasons. So I was there to see it over the finish line, but not a lot of the development. But my understanding was the original genesis for this came from a desire to be able to value data assets and come up with a common standard for doing that, which is not what this ended up doing. I mean, that would, to get consensus on something like that would have been challenging, shall we say.
Sure.
So, in terms of what the standard is, well, I mean, first of all, it's not a standard as such. It doesn't say, you shall do this, you shall do that in the way that 55,001 does, but it's actually guidelines on the management of data assets. So that's the title. But it talks about more than data assets. It, as I don't know if, when you were showing the content, for the purposes of ISO 55013, it talks about asset data, referring to data about assets. It also talks about data assets in terms of collections of asset data, potentially requiring management as an asset, in and of itself. So those are the two different things there. I also think that actually it's worth calling out the amount of ALN members that were involved in this. I'm going to forget some people here, so it's probably one of those, not like the award ceremonies where you don't name anybody in case you forget somebody. But I mean, Amelia was involved, is very, very involved in the US TAG work. Jim Dieter has been very involved and leading the US group. Rich Culbertson, Jack Kelly, Lindsay Ziegler, Jack Dempsey, and probably this is others that I'm forgetting right now. But I think the ALN has been pretty instrumental in helping guide that standard where it's going. So yeah, section 4, I think you talked about it. That actually talks about asset data as opposed to data assets. Section 5, which I think you'd be glad to see, talks about delivering value from asset data. And again, that ties back to an increased focus on value and decision making in the updated 55,001. So there's a short section as well on identifying data assets to give people guidance on what a data asset is and how to find it, whether you've got it. I mean, or which elements of your data could be considered and treated as an asset. And I think data is very temporal. It's easily lost, and it's hard to value. But it's instrumental in pretty much everything we do today. So this I think this is an area that is going to see more development over time. But the last section, 7, well, not section 7, gets into things about identifying how data is related to organizational objectives, organizational strategy, looking at data availability, and then applying asset management to those data assets. It also talks about interoperability. I think that was one place where I actually was able to add a couple of comments before we pushed it over the finish line, because I think a lot of people, when they talk about interoperability, just think about getting the right data in the right form. You know, is it syntactically correct, and is everything in the right place? And then people can just reach out and use that. Where if you look at the definitions, well, the many definitions of interoperability, I think the common components of that are it's the ability to exchange and use, you know, understand and use the information that's been exchanged. And I think I actually called this out when we were giving our talk. But you know, the example I always point to is the Mars orbiter from you know, a decade and a half ago, whenever it was, where NASA and JPL were working together, and one of them was working in metric units and one was working in imperial units. You know, everything was structured correctly in terms of what the data was, but failing to understand and use it appropriately caused some pretty catastrophic problems. Beyond that, I think the thing that's been going on recently with after the standard got to FDIS and then was approved, the working group 9 that worked on that was disbanded, and also technical group 2, working group 8. But working group 3, who Jack Kelly is the deputy convener of, and has been extended for another 3 years. So congratulations, Jack. Yeah, working group 3 is looking at communications around all of the standards, and for 55,013, the types of things they've been looking at are, you know, who are the target audience groups? What are the levels of awareness within those groups? What is their involvement in asset management? What types of benefits can they expect? So, you know, there's a lot of the kind of what's in it for me that you typically need to consider in communicating the value in something like this. I mean, I think this is a valuable document. I don't mean to put it down, but I suspect anybody that's been heavily involved in information management, setting up, you know, data or information governance systems, is going to read this and say, it doesn't tell me anything I don't already know. But the point is to get everybody up to a base level of understanding so that we're all on the same page. And I think it does an excellent job of that. I do think one of the things that Working Group 3 didn't necessarily look at is how do people intend to use it. I think how do people intend to use 55,013 is almost more important than, you know, are they engineers, are they upper management, are they mid-management, and so on. It's you know, what is the message you're trying to use 55,000 to convey? And you know, which are the right pieces, you know, places in the guidelines to go to actually help you, you know, get that message across to your audience. But you know, they pretty much cover the gambit in all of the things they were looking at, I think. So, and governance is actually the final section. I didn't say that. I think I got as far as managing data assets and availability and stuff, and then forgot to say that governance is actually the final section. And of course, that is a really important piece of this.
Well, that's what I've been finding with just ISO 55,000 in general. Governance is the role of asset management, and it is what everybody already knows. However, by having the document, you can use that as a pulpit and say, hey, everybody, we need to do these things. And by having this outside third-party document that says this is the best practice list, you're able to get people to say, yes, okay. It's not just because you have experience. Amelia?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, you know, managing federal real property has been on GAO's high risk list for over 20 years. And one of the key components for that is data reliability, data quality. So that's an issue throughout the government. And one of the reasons, only one of a few reasons why GAO has kept managing federal real property on its list. But I think what's important about this is it's a different perspective. So if the federal government or the agencies could think about the value they get from asset data. That's a different way of looking at it. And I wonder if that would make a difference.
And
Well,
oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead, Mark.
No, I saw the red bubble on the chat window, so just opened it up. So I just saw Chris's comment. So yeah, we did invite Shiv to talk with us today. But I think it's worth calling out Shiv because yeah, he was the deputy convener of Working Group 9. He did a lot of the going through the hundreds of comments on the various draft stages of the guidelines. Shiv ran those meetings really well. He's a wonderful guy. He put in an awful lot of hard work on this. And actually, while Amelia and I were in Denver, he actually got an email from the IAM actually saying that he'd just been made a fellow of the IAM. So also like to congratulate Shiv for that as well.
Excellent.
But if you can get him to talk about something at some point when he's not busy, he'd be great to talk about this.
Oh, I just from you indicating that he would be a good person today, I've reached out on LinkedIn, and what I've seen on LinkedIn, I'm enthralled with him, and I just want to talk with him, whether it's on this program or not. He's quite an engaging individual. But Amelia, back to what you were saying about federal data asset management. That's part of what the National Institute of Building Sciences is doing with their digital twin conference, and that we're hoping to preview a twin storm to show how federal agencies can be dealing with their data as assets better, and connecting them to digital twins just makes it simple for people to understand the information because they see a visual representation of the plane, train, automobile, HVAC unit, water pump, whatever the assets are, and they can light up in red when there's a problem, and other types of simple reporting that can happen through a digital twin system of systems. So that's part of the leadership step we're doing, is promoting what National Institute of Building Sciences is doing.
Yeah, that's great.
So yes, Mark.
I see another question from Chris that I'd actually missed. What were the biggest challenges in developing 55,013? So, being late to the game, I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. Although my first experiences is when we actually started going through the masses of comments. But as you might expect, I mean, any document that has to be translated into different languages, finding suitable language that can, that lends itself to doing that is a challenge. It does get particularly challenging, I think, when you start splitting hairs by saying that data assets and asset data are different things. So, there was, and also straying into what is data, what is information, what is knowledge. So, there was some traps or quicksand, I guess, in the process that had to be avoided. But I think everybody was pretty happy with the final result.
Amelia, what do you think were the challenges?
I wasn't involved in that.
Okay.
I'm involved with the US tag, but I wasn't involved in that particular standard.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, then a special thanks to you, Amelia, for joining today to provide a report on the Institute of Asset Management National North American Conference, and Mark for your roles in both the IAM, where you're a fellow, and the ALN, where you're a fellow. Appreciate that, and your insights on the ISO 55013 data as an asset standard. I think you're right. It's going to be a big issue, and we'll be touching back with it more. Maybe we'll get into some things more when we finally connect with Shiv and the other people on the committee. So thank you, and thank you to our audience. I am going to take just a second to once again, thank everyone. Well, let's go backwards. Yeah. You know who you are. Thank you. And thanks to the attendees, very engaging with the conversation and chat today. So thanks, and we'll see you again next week.
Good to see you.
Bye for now.